So, hello everyone. This is Amir from Designhill, and I'm your host for today. I hope everyone is keeping safe and taking care of themselves and taking necessary precautions so that we don't go into another lockdown and hurt economy again. So, welcome again for this event by Designhill, and today we'll be discussing how to validate, launch, and grow your business ideas, which is the most relevant question when it comes to startups and the entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, and most of our 1.7 million business community who subscribe to Designhill for their creative needs. So this event is brought to you by Designhill, world's leading creative marketplace that caters to the creative needs of businesses and individuals alike, who can source high quality creatives from more than 175K artists and designers from more than 180 countries who are there on the Designhill. We also have a print on demand creative marketplace e-commerce called Print Shop, where you can buy more than 50 creative products created by artists with different designs. You can custom create your own, or if you're a brand, you can open up your store and let Designhill take care of all the e-commerce hassles of logistics, customer service, and deliveries. So let me welcome today's panel that we have here with us for this discussion. First of all, I would like to welcome Daniel Marcos. He's a serial entrepreneur, business coach, and a passionate learner. He's the co-founder and CEO of Growth Institute, the leading online executive education company for C-level executives and at fast-growing firms. He's also a keynote speaker and a CEO coach with a mission to help 1 million entrepreneurs. He's a member of YPO and EO and is a certified coach in scaling up methodology. He's a graduate of EO Premier CEO program, The Birthing of Giants, and he holds a BS in Industrial and System Engineering from Monterey Tech and an MBA from Babson College. So also with us here today is Raj Jha. He's an investor and advisor. His superpower is generating demand for the business he advises and invests in. Raj successfully founded and exited multiple companies, being an executive that took a company public, and is former Silicon Valley corporate attorney who represents Facebook, Yahoo, Electronic Arts, and other household names. And our third panelist for today is Steve Hoffman, or Captain Hoff, as he's called in Silicon Valley. He's the chairman and CEO of Founders Space, one of the world's leading incubator and accelerator. He's also an angel investor, limited partner at August Capital, serial entrepreneur, and author of several award-winning books. Hoffman was founder and chairman of the Producer Guild Silicon Valley chapter, served on board of the governor of the New Media Council, and was founding member of the Academy of Television Interactive Media Group. And we also have with us is Victor Kayosef. Started his career in the hospitality industry when he was just 14 years old and spent about 7 years working at five-star resorts and restaurants. Afterwards, he did a pivot and focused on tech startups. Ever since there, he has been running a startup himself or joined after fast-growing startups. His last two roles were as head of marketing at a travel startup in Indonesia, and now as COO at Greenhouse.co in Singapore. At Greenhouse, he helps startups to expand to the world's most exciting, fast-growing markets. In his spare time, he writes bi-weekly newsletter on entrepreneurship. So we have a power-packed panel here today. I'm sure everybody would share their experiences and hacks and tricks and growth stories and how all you can scale up your organization. And if you have any specific challenges and issues that you're facing currently, you can drop the questions in the question box here. Or if you wish to chat with the speakers online, you can do that in the chat section. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
So, guys, I will be asking different questions that you guys have already shared with us since we promoted this panel discussion, and we'll ask our esteemed panelists to share their opinions on this one. So before going ahead, we have a big certificate for all the attendees who would stick till the end of the session. You just can't miss on this chance, so stay tuned till the end. And also you can take the screenshot of this event, post it on your Twitter handles, use hashtag Designhill events, and tag Designhill at Founderspace, at Raj Jha, at Victor_Kayosef, whose Twitter handles we'll be putting down in the chat section. And one lucky winner will have a chance to win a print shop gift card worth $50. Also, we have a sharing and exclusive coupon codes with everyone at the end of the session, using which you can avail 50% discount, 15% discount, I'm sorry, on Designhill contest services to build your brand. So stay tuned. So, all right. So before we start the session, let's quickly look at what Designhill is all about.
Need to get your parents off your back? Head to the world's #1 creative marketplace, Designhill.
When I started my photography business, I needed something that said, this was more than just a hobby. It's not a hobby, Mom. That's why I went to Designhill and got an amazing logo super fast at a price I could afford. The process was easy using Designhill's logo maker. Just enter the name of your business, then pick out a number of designs that inspire you. I'll pick this one and that one looks cute. Then pick your colors or let the system decide. Add some more info like a slogan, the industry your business is in, and your budget. The logo maker, using machine learning and artificial intelligence, will design thousands of logo variants that you can choose from and adapt. In fact, I was able to get everything from business cards to t-shirt design and complete social media kit, all with the click of a button. With that, I'm all set. Now everyone I meet knows I'm a legit photographer. Even my mom. It's real. That's decaf.
Let the world know it's real and build your brand with Designhill.
So thank you guys. So let's get started right away. So I would take the really fundamental question I'll start with so that we get this conversation rolling. I'll ask Steven this question. So Steven, just basics. I mean, how does anybody validate his or her business idea apart from, asking a bunch of friends or just family who are always appreciative of you and wish you to do and excel in the world? What is the correct means and way to validate your idea to start with?
So I have a rule of thumb. If you go out to 100 potential customers, these are the people you expect to either use your product or buy your product, and you ask them, do you like my product? What do you think? And you show them a prototype, a demo, the early version, even a PowerPoint. And their feedback is, oh, that's nice. Come back when it's ready. If you hear that from pretty much everybody, you are dead in the water. You might as well give up, because honestly, nobody buys a nice product. All of us want a great product. And if you think about it, why would you use the second best or the third best? You want the best. When you download an app, if you look at it and you go, oh, that's pretty nice, a week later, that app is gone from your phone. So you got to have people, when they see your product, to validate it, say, oh my God, I really need that. Or, oh my God, I want to try that. Let me try that. How do I try that? Can you send me the link? You have to get that reaction from a certain percentage, not everybody, but at least 20% of your potential customers. And that customer base has to be large enough to grow the size business you want. If you want a small business, the customer base can be pretty niche. But if you want to grow a unicorn and you want venture capital, that customer base has to be $1 billion+ worth of customers, annually. So how you validate, really the best way to validate, is to make as much progress as you can early on in your startup, developing, and then go to the customer. But you don't just go to your customers once. You want a continual dialogue with them. So it's an iterative process where you go out at the very early stages and you're like, what do you think of this idea? And it's just an idea. Maybe you're pitching them verbally or showing them a PowerPoint, and you gauge their reaction. If they're like blasé about it, if they're like, they don't really need it, when they understand what you have, then they don't really need it. You have to listen to them very closely. And then you go out again when you have a prototype. You go out again when you have an alpha version. You go out again when you have a beta version. You never stop engaging with your customers. That is the best way to get the feedback you need to move forward.
We're not hearing you.
I'm sorry, I was just muted. So I want to take this question to Daniel and ask him that how do you define and determine that 20% of your customer audience or the first 100 customers that you take this feedback from?
So Peter Diamandis always says, you want to have $1 billion company, find $1 billion problem. So I like entrepreneurs that are not in love with their product. They're in love with the solution. What is the impact their product does? So first, understand a problem that you're figuring out, and then going, as Steve said, go with a prototype or an idea or something, and get customers to give you money. Another good mentor of mine said, I just take suggestions for people that write me a check, sorry. So if people said, hey, I love your idea, whatever, but now this is not really for me, don't take their advice. If people said, hey, if you do that, here's my check. I'll give you an advance or something. Get it right in a week or whatever and send it to me. Just take advice from people that write checks. So as Steve said at the beginning, just go with your idea, start knocking some doors so people that you know, social media, friends, family, whatever, and just tell them about the idea, tell them about the problem that they have, how do you expect to fix it or take care of the problem, and get their thoughts, and said, okay, if you really like it, can you write me a check? I'll give you a 50% discount. Just write me a check. And if they said yes, do it. If not, don't do it. Hello?
Yeah, Daniel, we can hear you.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that was my advice. Just take advice from the people that will write you a check.
Okay.
And finance your company with your clients. I am a huge believer that the best way to do it is getting money from your clients, fixing their problem.
Okay, all right. That sounds great. So, Raj, I just wanted to ask this question to you, that when people start out, they're usually confused about the pricing that they should enter the market with. So it's usually relatively easy to do competitive analysis in terms of if you're B2B. But I would like to, you to address our generic audience who are into B2B and B2C as well. And how do they do, and how do they start with the right pricing? Because recently, I remember I've been interviewing a lot of people, and I came across an interview and they said that, we just asked people that, what do you think that the cost of this SaaS tool should be? And they said it should be worth around $15 per user subscription per month. And they said, let's take, write a check for us for the 6 months and start using it. I mean, like Daniel mentioned here that, validate it from the customers who are ready to pay you the check. So my question to you is how to go about the right pricing strategy when starting out.
I think, first of all, what Steve said, what Daniel said is 100% correct. I mean, you have to start out with getting people who will actually write that check, right? So not the people who are like, oh, maybe that's kind of interesting, that's cute, whatever. But I think if you think about having people who will write you checks, this is part of your testing, right? I mean, I tend to back up and say it's not about minimum viable product. It's either about minimum viable community before there's a product, or minimum viable marketing. What is the minimum that's necessary to actually get someone interested in the product? Because I think Daniel encapsulated this really well. Until someone writes a check, it doesn't matter, right? It literally does not matter, because they're not willing to do that. So I always say sell it first. And when you're doing that, it's all about price testing. Now you can gauge that from other things in the market. I mean, you can either approach it from, here are some other things in the market and similar tools. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to really look at the pain point and say, what kind of problem am I solving? Because it goes back to, again, what is the problem that you're solving? And is there some financial, or in some cases, if it's a consumer app, a personal benefit that someone would get from it? So it's a little easier in a B2B context sometimes. Again, it depends on the product, because you can quantify it more. But the more that you can quantify it, either for an individual or for a B2B entity of some sort, the easier it's going to be, because you're saying, well, here's what your situation is now. If you use this, you'll save this much. This is free money. So again, but I would go back to the minimum viable marketing to try first, or minimum viable community. And I think that's an underappreciated thing, creating community before you create a product. Because who's going to join a community unless they're passionate about this? Who better to give your minimum viable product ideas than the community? And then you'll get real information, right? Instead of just going to someone who might give you 5 minutes of their time, but they're really just giving you 5 minutes of their time. They're not actually truly involved. So those are my thoughts on kind of pricing and how you get there.
That's wonderful. I really like the idea of, developing and generating and building up your community before going ahead and starting out, because then you get real-time feedback, and you have a people and sample to test with. But Victor, what if there's a client, and you work with a lot of clients and startups to help them grow, and what if a client wants to go via survey, and they want to have a large sample size of the audience to test their idea with? I mean, if they're really into the mass selling of the products. So what do you suggest for people who wish to do a survey, and what kind of tools or softwares would you suggest them? And what about the approach? Because survey in itself, it's a very vast concept. People get lost into it, and they really, at the end of it, they really make sense out of it. So what is the approach that people should go ahead with? And if you could suggest some tools which can help them.
Sure. So, I mean, of course, I do agree with everything that's been said so far. And as it comes to surveys, to be frank, I'm not a big fan of surveys. I think very few people are really good at actually running surveys. I think most people don't know how to do that, and it can be really misleading. And another thing you need to be mindful about, when you're testing new ideas, is attitude versus behavior. And I think Daniel and Raj were talking about that earlier. Because when you ask people, would you use that? most people would be like, yes, sure. Why would people turn you down and be like mean to you when even if they don't know you, and especially if they do know you, everyone is trying to be nice. So, always consider the attitude versus behavior, because, asking questions around, would you use it? Of course I would use it. But then, as you go to them and try to sell it, and, you try to get some behavior out of that, that's when you really find out if people are going to use it. So that's why I think surveys are incredibly difficult to design. And I think nothing beats actually the experience of talking to people face to face and asking hard questions and adapting to the situation. So that's why, my advice would be actually to not do surveys unless you're really good at doing that and you have good experience. Actually, I think it's much better to talk to people and to try to sell them, to try to get some kind of engagement, some type of commitment, whether it's their time or money, preferably money, because that shows that they really want to use whatever you're building. At least that's my experience of validating early stage concepts.
I 100% agree with you. So guys, as of now, we have discussed how to select a sample size, and only treat those customers serious who are willing to pay you, and how to do the sampling and building up your community, and why not to go with surveys, and why to go with the customers who are willing to pay with you as your validating customers. But what about scaling up the business? I mean, not just a few customers who are willing to pay you the check are going to pay your bills, right? As a business, because at the end of the day, it's not just an individual. You may have a team, you may have a setup, and you may have tools and softwares to pay and supporting partners to take care of. So what about those people? How can they sustain their business till they reach break even or make some profits, and really get that initial traction from the customers or the clients that they're having? How to make that initial money to survive? Stephen, I would take that to you first. I'm sorry, your mic is muted.
Yes. Okay. So there are a lot of ways. It can be very difficult at the start. And I tell entrepreneurs, if you are going to start a business, make sure you have at least enough money to survive, to feed yourself and pay the rent for 6 months to a year. Because even that long, it's hard to get any meaningful revenue. I meet entrepreneurs all the time, and they have to take no salary for 3 years. And that can be extremely hard. So, but there are a lot of ways to do this. First of all, you don't have to quit your day job. So a lot of great startups out there began with people working full-time, but taking that extra effort on nights and weekends and every moment they have to grow their business. And you can do this too. And that is one way. You could have a spouse that works for you, that works while you're working on your startup and supports you. So that's another way. A third way is, it's really important to conserve your cash at the beginning. So I tell people at the very beginning of a startup, instead of going out to the world and actually building a product, talking to customers, trying to raise capital, all those things that you think you should do, look for the people you need to execute really well on your business. Spend 80% of your time building your team. If you build a great team, if all of you are committed for the long haul, that will help you survive. Because, when you're in it together, you don't quit. And when you have the right people, you can actually implement the product in the right way to get money. The third thing I tell people is it's really hard to raise venture capital at the beginning. So don't even waste your time going after investors. You need to get traction. So and if you want money, if you need money, there are a couple ways. One, with a great team, you can actually take on paid work. So, if you have a great technical co-founder, if you have great designer, you guys could design products for other people as you build your product on the side. Or you can go to the customers that you think will really need your product. And if these customers are large companies or medium-sized companies and they have budgets, you could actually ask them to pay a portion in advance to help fund the initial product development. Because if they really need it, like everybody on the panel has said, they will write you a check. The third thing is that, like, if you need to sell your product and you need a salesperson, you can't pay them. What you could do is, set up a commission structure, a really generous commission structure, so that they will earn far more if they make sales than they would if you just paid them a salary. There are so many ways to get people on board early and start to get traction, but those are just a few, and I'll let the other panelists talk more about it.
You're muted.
So Victor, I would like you to add your points to that.
Yeah, so I think in the early days, of course, first of all, I agree with what Steven was saying, and of course, it's very difficult in the very, very beginning, to get venture capital, and especially it matters where you're based. Some parts of the world, like I'm based in Southeast Asia. In Southeast Asia, healthy unit economics are very, very important from the very beginning. There are other parts of the world where most probably, an idea can get you some kind of funding. Here, it's really hard unless you're very well connected and the VCs for a very long time yourself. So there are a few ways, right? One is that you can minimize your costs. Right. So what Y Combinator says that you need to be ramen profitable, so that you try to minimize as much as you can. Don't hire too many people. Don't overspend. And in that sense, it's much easier to close a few customers, and in that sense, become profitable very early. Also, one thing that I've been doing, in my startup experience is that as you're building your MVP and you're creating some kind of solution that on the outside looks great, right? But behind, it's a lot of manual work and a lot of duct taping and, and people running and just, doing the work. So, just creating something that looks great on the outside, but behind, it's actually powered by you and the rest of the founders. So in that sense, it looks good enough to be sold. And, few people would actually understand that it's actually not automated and there is actually people that are doing it. So that helps you to actually bring good customers early on. And we have done it a bunch of times. Every time we have, some assumption, that's what we do. We build a very fancy page on top, and we do it manually until we get enough traction to actually build a product behind it. So yeah, these are just my considerations.
So Raj, I was recently reading a stat that offsite entrepreneurs and offsite startups, they have a chance of making 30% more growth in comparison to the on-site startups. They incur few costs at the office and other miscellaneous costs. So do you really think that the offsite startups have certain advantage over the on-site startups?
It's an it depends type of situation. I think that I was kind of early-ish to that game, since I took my company virtual about 10 years ago. So not super early, but earlier than this current wave that's requiring everyone to do that. I would say that there's definitely advantage for hiring quickly. You can get great talent. You've got a global ability to do that. If you are in California, like Steven and I are, it's frankly expensive. It's painful. The paperwork is painful. And looking elsewhere for talent can help. However, I think there is a lot of value to having at least the core team, especially the founding team, be able to meet in person. There's this certain element, I think, in this interaction that happens in kind of casual interaction as you're doing your day that really matters for the founding team. So I would say it cuts both ways. I would say having a founding team that if it's a true startup and you haven't actually gotten liftoff and you haven't identified the product market fit completely, then being close works really well. At later stages of growth, when the company is a little more on rails and it's a little harder to turn and you don't necessarily need to turn as much, then I think it's fine to be much more distributed. But this is just an opinion. It's not based on any numbers. It's just what I've seen with my companies in the past and with the companies I work with now.
Okay. So Daniel, as Stephen mentioned, he said, not you just not need to quit initially your job, and you can start after the working hours, and when you think that you're ready to go, you can just quit and start your own entrepreneurship. So when do people know that it's time to quit? Is it only the financial, if they're able to support them or support a couple of their employees? That just the only index to know when to quit, or you can just see that your business is scaling up and it needs more of your time and I should quit? What are the indexes to know that when to quit to a job and go completely into the entrepreneurship?
So the first one is the revenue, and the revenue, it's also going to tell you the traction that the product or the service is getting. So if you're getting enough traction and you see the trend that is stable, then you could jump. If you're having these ups and downs and the revenue is not there, I will fear jumping into it. And also is when the company really needs you. And I'll tell you Growth Institute story. I started the company with Vern Harnish, my mentor, and then we realized none of us had time to build it. So we said, okay, let's go and hire someone, and we'll, from our income, pay that person for that person to run it. So that person ran the company until around 7 or 8 employees. And I was working half time, let's say from 6 p.m. to 12 o'clock. I was working for the company, no salary or anything, but I was during the day doing my full-time job and during the night working for my startup. And when it was around 7 or 8 employees, I got a call from the CEO we hired, and he called me and said, this is the right time for you to come now. And now the company was doing a couple of million a year. It was very easy to scale. Then I jumped and scaled it. So the first couple of million in revenue, I had my best friend running it, and he did a great job running the company. So that doesn't mean that you have to start it yourself. In our case, it was different. We were not going to do venture capital. We were going to self-fund it. And we both of the founders had a big revenue coming in our income today. So we use that. As Steve said, the best entrepreneurs, they don't jump because they know it takes time. So they take their job, they keep their job, they do consulting, they do software development, whatever they need to do to have the cash to develop the product or the service for the company. 100%.
Okay, wonderful. So I want to ask Victor this question that like you work with a lot of startups. I really want to ask you that what is the ratio or a general trend that you see of businesses which are successful having a couple of co-founders or just the solopreneurs? I mean, having a couple of co-founders, is it really an X factor for your business to click?
I mean, we do work with a lot of startups. We actually, what we do is that we help startups expand across Asia Pacific. So we typically work with Series A or post-Series A founder startups, and most of them come from Asia. In my experience, most of them are actually a group of people. It's very rare to see one solo founder. That doesn't mean that this wouldn't work. There's always exceptions, and it really depends. Depends on how confident that person is to run a business on his own. I think it's great when you have a few people because they can be complementary. One could be technical, one could be a more business focused. In my experience, most people that we work with are actually a few founders. Typically would be 2 to 3 founders. It's very rare to see more than 3. And it's very rare also in Asia to see solo founders. At least that's my experience.
Okay, so Raj, would you like to add to that based on your experience? I mean, is it good to have diverse background of co-founders and then start your business, or solopreneurs can also do, and you might have seen any success stories?
Both, and I think it might be a slightly different path each way, because more often I see the solopreneur having to do more services to get the company to the next stage. They just need to get some revenue in the door, and it starts as a services organization that's building a technology infrastructure, as folks have mentioned. When there's a group, it seems to me like then they can start to parcel out pieces of product, and then they can join forces in that way. So I think either can work. Personally, I tend to deal more with single founder companies. And mostly that's because I'm dealing with slightly later stage ones and companies that are able to make super quick decisions. And the bigger the founding team is, sometimes the slower the decision-making process. And for what I do, at least in terms of helping with lead generation, et cetera, if there are too many folks at the table which have too many diverse ideas about that, it's sometimes hard to herd all the cats and say, guys, this is what it's going to take to get from here to there, to get from 1 million in ARR to 10 million in ARR. You're going to have to do a series of things which might seem unnatural to your startup genetics. So I tend to deal more with the individual founder. That does not mean, and I don't want to say that that's indexing that that's more successful. I'm just saying that happens to be the sample set that I'm dealing with.
Okay. So Stephen, what's your take on that?
So it depends as Raj said, it depends what type of business you're building. So for most venture capitalists here in Silicon Valley, where I am located, they prefer fully formed teams. And the reason they prefer that is because it takes a long time for a lot of these companies to get going, and they have to build a product. And they don't have the money. And the only way to build a product without a lot of money before you get venture capital is to sweat equity for everybody on the team to put in money. So, a lot of us here, venture capitalists, I invest in a lot of these startups. A lot of us look at the company very closely, and we don't just look at the CEO. We look at who that CEO was able to bring onto the team to work for equity, not to work for money, not a contractor, because that shows commitment. And what we want is if that CEO has built an all-star team, like people who could be working at Google or Facebook or anywhere they want and getting incredible salaries, but they chose to work for this startup, that is a form of validation for the investor. That lets us know, wow, this CEO has shown leadership. They were able to convince very amazing people to give up great jobs and invest in their company. That means as an investor, I should invest in it. And I have a kind of rule of thumb. I write about this in my book, Surviving a Startup. I have a rule of thumb, and that is you can't build a $1 billion company by yourself. You always need other people. So getting great people is the CEO's number one job right off the bat. And once you have a great team, you can iterate, you can try new ideas, you can overcome problems. Everything becomes so much easier.
So Daniel, how do you attract great talent when starting out? I mean, since Stephen has emphasized how important it is to scale up and really attract VC's attentions and the money. So how do you attract the great talent when starting out?
So I said that on the first stage or at the beginning of a company, you don't choose your employees choose you. So the best way to attracting them is selling your vision. The best thing you could do is selling your idea and the culture and the values and what you want to build and the dream. And the right people are going to be attracted to the organization. Of course, if they get attracted and there's no chemistry, whatever, you don't offer them a position, or they come in and it doesn't work and they end up leaving. But the best way to attract people, it's offering or selling your vision and talking about your vision. And here's why I say they choose you. You don't have good salaries, guarantees, and all these things to give. So they come because they really want to work for you. They got engaged with the dream and they're betting on you and betting on the dream. So the best way to get really high caliber people, you won't be able to pay them. You have to sell them the vision, sell them the dream, and they will come to you.
That's absolutely correct. So I hope everybody is enjoying this discussion. We have touched upon few topics, and we are going to touch few more in terms of when to reach out to the VCs and what should be the approach, and when would VC be certainly investing in your money after this short little break. And we'll be taking questions from the questions tab itself, which people have asked us right now and over the period of this event. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be back.
I've always been creative and always been an artist. As a young girl, I used to paint rocks and I used to sell them for a quarter on the street. And I just fell in love with it. It just grew into a passion of mine. I started looking on the web and I came across Designhill, and they had a design contest to design a logo, and I entered it and I won. And I was like, oh, this is really great. I can pick and choose what type of logos or design projects I want to work on. And it allows me to be creative, keep my hands, with my tools and working. So it's kind of nice. It's really easy to use. You can scroll through the projects and there's sections that you could go by. It's really easy. There's a few clients who have come back to use the one-on-one projects. There's one client in particular, she owns a vintage shop, and I designed her logo, and she came back. She needed a design for a flyer, and she really liked the illustrations that I did for her, so she came back a couple of times with projects. I would recommend it, especially if you're a designer that's starting out and you want to learn from other designers, seasoned designers. It's a place to keep in the game and keep using your tools. It makes me feel great, and it kind of confirms that I should be doing this. And I love to see logos that I've designed out, and proud of that. And I think that the clients are so happy that their logo represents what they do and, you know, makes them look good. It's a collaboration. It's good for me, and it's definitely good for them.
So welcome back, guys, and I have few more questions to ask the panelists, and then I'll be taking your questions from the questions section. And my first question after the break goes to Raj, and I really want to ask him that, you know, do you think that having a business coach initially gives you a right direction and helps you utilize your resources economically and really build on and scale up your business, or people can do without it? Do you think really business coaches can be helpful and people should opt for them?
Yes. It kind of depends on if you've done this before and what kind of business coach you need. If you run other businesses and you've successfully been able to take it from an idea into execution, then maybe you don't need one from the get-go. But if you're doing this for the first time, there's really only so much that you can gather from the outside and read about or watch these panels or do anything like that. So I think having someone who can actually has the benefit experience and has the frameworks, the mental frameworks to say, okay, I've seen this before, because it's about pattern recognition. You've seen this situation before, you're applying it. And so if you've done it successfully in the past, then I'd say, maybe, but odds are you've probably discovered some people. They might not be a formal business coach, but you've got similar colleagues who have done things similar to you that you can bounce it off of. I can't tell you, I've been in this game one way or another for, a long, long time. And I still have a group of people who I consistently go to when I want to sanity check something. So, even though I've started multiple ventures, I'm still doing that at this point. And I think that at least says, well, either that I'm not very good at this, or that it's an important part of the process. So I would say having a mentor, and also the right mentor for the right stage of the business, because they're not always right. Because there are some that are much better attuned to what the startup world is going with, and then some are better for more scaling. And it really depends on the point of development of the business.
I'm sorry. So when Stephen, I just want to ask this question to you, since you elaborated upon it quite a bit before the break. So when do people know that it's the right time to approach a venture capitalist for funding, and what is the correct way to approach, and how should they be closing the deals?
Okay, this is important. You can approach a venture capitalist at any time. And sometimes you can get funding just off a PowerPoint. I've done it. I know I raised millions of dollars off a PowerPoint, but I don't encourage you to do it. First of all, when you do it, your business isn't fully vetted. You don't really understand your business until you've gone out there and actually built something and got it in the hands of customers. Also today, most venture capitalists who know what they're doing, they want to see some proof that your business really works. So the more you can show them, the more likely you are to close funding. So don't waste your time trying to go out and hunt down VCs, chasing them when you don't have enough to convince them. The second thing, part of your question, is how do you sell a VC? And I have raised a lot of money in my lifetime for myself and for hundreds of entrepreneurs who go through our founder space programs. And I tell them that when you go to a VC, don't try to sell them on your idea. Like, don't push your idea on them. That is not what they want. So it's like when you walk into a store to buy a television. If the salesperson is like just pushing the TV on, you need this, this is great, this TV has this feature, that feature, this feature, you can get off put. They're pressuring you. What you want is them to listen to you and really understand what you want. So if you're going out there to get a VC, first of all, do your homework. Don't waste your time on VCs who don't invest in your sector. VCs tend to have theses in their head. They are looking for certain types of businesses. And if you can figure out what they're looking for and walk in the door with that, your chance of closing is much higher. The second thing is, when you're in a meeting with a VC, don't do all the talking. A lot of entrepreneurs feel like it's their job to explain everything. It's not the amount you explain. It's the dialogue you have. Really smart VCs want to just talk to you, go back and forth, understand who you are, ask questions. People are much more engaged when they are asking a question than when they're being told something. So if they ask the question, they're taking ownership. They're taking an interest in your business. In fact, the more talking the VC does and the less talking you do, ironically, that's the highest chance of closing a deal. My third piece of advice is closing is hard. You need to give VCs a timeline. You can't let them go forever. Like if you don't set some sort of deadline for them to make a decision, a lot of VCs will wait, because why not? Like if this company isn't, hot, if it's not going anywhere, then I'll sit back and see how it develops. And maybe I'll decide yes, maybe I'll decide no. So when you go into a VC, you have to let them know, first of all, your time is valuable. You are talking to other VCs. And if they don't make an investment decision, let's say in 1 or 2 weeks, then you're moving on. They have to intuitively get this, because if they don't, they won't. People tend not to act. So really good presenters, really good CEOs, when they are pitching VCs, they are actually laying out a scenario and taking control. They aren't letting the VC set the deadlines. They are taking control. And I tell entrepreneurs that during closing, your best chance is on the first pitch, you explain everything. On the second pitch, you're answering all their questions. You're giving them all the material they need. By the time you pitch them the third time, that's the time to close. Literally, on the third pitch, after the third pitch, usually, your chance of closing is at its peak. And after that, it starts to decline exponentially. So the longer you wait, the more time you have elapsed, the VCs are on to the next shiny object. They're on to the next startup, and the chance of closing goes down. So really set up a structure and make your move systematically, and you will find it works much better.
Okay, wonderful. So my question is to Victor, and it's from Adri Wong, and the question is, in year 2021, what sort of trends do you see, and what sort of entrepreneurs, startups are going to be booming after this COVID, since we have seen a completely paradigm shift in terms of conducting businesses? Victor.
Yeah, well, that's a big question, and again, I think we always need to consider the geographical location. I think the things that are right now really exciting in Silicon Valley are quite different than the things that are exciting in Southeast Asia. I think what typically happens is that whatever happens in the West, the East follows, and and you kind of see it happening a couple of years later. So I think, in Southeast Asia, what we saw first, there was a boom of what we call super apps, which was a model that, got popular in China, where, you're going to have this one startup that offers a lot of different solutions, from ordering food to ordering transportation to, ordering someone to clean your house. So pretty much everything you can literally live through this one application, right? So that was the first wave that was really big. And there is a few big winners that came out of that. And I think, next what, so as you know, the first wave was more towards B2C. I think, the B2B space is not that export in Southeast Asia. I think there is not that much solutions, or at least now we start seeing more and more SaaS solutions that are coming, because, most businesses have this feeling that, they're very digitalized because they use these B2C solutions all the time and they're on their phones a lot. But actually, when you look into how they operate on a day-to-day basis, when you look at how they actually conduct their operations and how much software they use, they're quite actually conventional. At least that's my experience. We work with more than 100 service providers across, many markets in Asia, and most of them are very, very conventional in the way they do business. Many of them don't even have a website in 2020. So I think, there is a massive opportunity in this part of the world for B2B solutions, and especially, aiming in small and medium businesses rather than enterprises, which, of course, that's another thing that definitely, there is a lot of players there as well. But, this is at least what I have observed as an interesting vertical that can work well.
Okay, so I have a question here from Herman, and I would like to ask this question to Daniel. And if I can sum up the question, what they're asking to trying to ask is that how to get an expert who's happens to be your friend also to work for you or work together in your team and really convince them, because he has been trying to close them and they're really busy and slow in terms of the response. So how do you sell that idea and the dream and the vision that we have been talking about and really onboard people?
So I always have a list of 25 people or influencers that I think they could influence my company and my growth. And I have a list in my desk all the time and kind of understanding and reaching out to them. And I'll give you a perfect example. One day I was teaching a lecture in Argentina and I was on stage teaching. And one of the guys of my 25 was on stage, was sitting down there watching. And in my conversation, I talk about how to hire great people and all that, and said, by the way, the guy sitting here, I think is amazing. I think he's the best marketer in Latin America. If he will be my head of marketing, my company will be doing 10 times more revenue than it is today. And I said that on stage to the guy. The guy at the end came to me and said, thank you very much. I'm flattered. I'm never going to work for you. I'm an entrepreneur. I do great. But I'll be happy to help you however I want. 6 months later, he called me and said, my employee that knows this the best is resigning because she's going to do her own agency. Do you want me to introduce you to her? And I was like, yes. So I was client number one of this agency. I've been working with her for 3 years, and it's been amazing. So if you tell them, hey, I think you're great, this is a part that you could significantly help me, they will recommend you, guide you, coach you, whatever to help you. The successful people, they want to share their success and help other people be successful. So if you at least tell them, they will open a lot of doors. And usually you have to do 25. If you just talk to one and they're having a bad day or whatever, the chance of not happening is high. If you have 25 in your list and people in different areas, you're most likely going to have 5 or 10 of them to help you scale your business. And I just knock the door and ask them.
So I wanted to ask this question to Raj that, when we talk about startups, there's a fierce competition in that level. I mean, they're not Fortune 500 companies which are established in their own fields. We're not talking about Unilevers of the world. So how do people maintain that competitive advantage when everybody is trying to do the me too, or they know about your strategies since you're out in the marketing and trying to do the best? How does people maintain that competitive advantage and try to outdo the competition? We have that question here from Abdullah.
I personally don't worry about competition too much. I worry about, am I solving a real problem? And what's my relationship with my customers? What's my relationship with my team? And if you have investors, the relationship with the investors. So if you're really solving a problem and you've got a retention of customers and you're really honing in on that, it's going to do you a lot better than worrying about the competition. Yes, you need to be aware of them. Yes, you might learn from things that they're doing, but I wouldn't spend energy worrying about the competition. I mean, that's one of those things that stalls a lot of projects, which is, oh, somebody's already doing that. And you don't necessarily know that, as Victor said, they've got, toothpicks and duct tape and dental floss holding together in the back, and it's about to crumble. And you just take a different tack. There's space in the market for multiple companies doing almost the exact same thing. They might be at different price points. They might have different features. They get different teams. They get different networks. So don't be afraid of competition. If anything, it'll just make you better. So I just reframe how you think about competition, because I don't think that at a startup stage is really what someone needs to be worrying about.
Okay, wonderful. And I would like to take this question to Victor before we take a few more questions from the audience. Is that, how to decide a marketing budget initially going forward? Because I think it's a very critical question that people usually face. I mean, should it come from the profits, or should it come from the investment, or is it like the prime source of scaling up, or should we just completely bank upon the concept and wait for the organic growth? So what do you have to say to people when it comes to these sort of questions in their mind while starting up?
Yeah, I think obviously, every startup is unique and every model is different. And, it matters a lot also what kind of skills you have and your team has, right? So one thing that I do whenever I start a new business or when I join an early stage company is that, there is a very good book called Traction that essentially argues that, a good way to actually figure out what works for you is to map all possible marketing channels. Then, experiment with each of them with relatively inexpensive budget to figure out which are the channels that actually going to click and work for you well, right? On the basis of that, you decide on which one you really want to double on. And I think that's a good way for you to really figure out what's going to work, because there are some channels that, actually do not require a lot of capital, and they're like, SEO or let's say content, you can actually do quite a bit on your own. So I think what is really important is not necessarily figuring out how much money to spend, but figuring out what kind of channel going to work for you, given what's your model, given what are the skills of the people on the team, and given what you have experimented and, and what you have learned on the basis of that. So I think that's so much more important than actually, just throwing money, because, it's easy to burn money, but, more money don't necessarily bring more results. I think, it's just about being analytical and figuring out what's going to work for you.
It looks like he's frozen. So maybe we should continue until he's back.
Yes.
Steve, you want to add on to that maybe?
Okay. So I wasn't prepared to do that, but let me give a few pieces of advice. So I work with a lot of startups, and one of the biggest mistakes that startups make when they start their business is to stick with the same idea for too long. All of us think like we're passionate about the idea. We don't want to give up. We don't want to change. We just must persevere. But persevering is important, but it doesn't mean not changing. So the really good entrepreneurs that I see out of there, they actually change all the time. They are experimenting all the time. They'll try one idea. It doesn't work. They'll try another idea. It seems like it's working. It doesn't work. And then they'll try another idea. And that, in doing that over and over and over again, that's how you build a successful business.
Wonderful. So before we wrap up the session, I'll ask this question to everybody and take everybody's opinion on it. So there are people who have great ideas and they have validated somehow through the basic samples of people they know, but they're somehow reluctant to bring that idea into reality. So what is your last message to people, Victor?
So what's basically the question is how to encourage people to take it to market, whatever they have built, right? Well, like if you have doubts about what you're starting, I think you shouldn't be doing any of that. I think, if you have any doubts, just give up. Starting a business is really hard. I think very few people have a very smooth journey. Most of the time it's pretty difficult. So if you have any doubts, just give up, move on, go do something else. Otherwise, if you're really excited about what you're doing, either about the product or about, the problem that you're solving, just go for it. And, like over time, iterate, as, Steven was saying, don't stick with the idea. Things are changing. My personal approach is the problem remains the same. The solution of how I'm solving it, changes over time as I'm learning more and more. So yeah, that's my opinion.
So I'll go next. Looks like he's frozen again. So for me, I really have to pass a test of 3 questions. First, I'm deeply passionate about. As Steve said at the beginning, it's going to be painful and it's going to take time. If I'm not passionate, I'm not going to pass. Second, and am I really good at, or can I be really good at? I don't think we have a startup problem. We have a scale-up problem. We have millions of startups, very few scale. So if I'm going to do a company, it's because I deeply know that I'm going to be able to scale it. If not, I just don't even do it. And third, that I'm solving a problem that people are willing to pay. There's a lot of problems people are not willing to pay. So it has to be such a deep problem people are willing to pay. I always said, I love to mountain bike. I could bike 10 hours a day. That's my hobby today. But I'm not really, really good at. I'm very, very slow. And no one will pay me to ride bicycle. So I will never do that. So find something you're really good at, you're passionate about, and you make money. And then go and do it.
And I'll add to that. So another thing you should think about is there an area that you can go deep on? Because the entrepreneurs that I see, they know they don't stop here. Like most people stop at a surface level on a business, but the really great entrepreneurs, they go further than other people. They start to figure out things that the rest of the market doesn't see. So if there's an area that, every day you sit down and you are really interested in learning every aspect of that business, that's a good focus for you to have as an entrepreneur.
I guess I'm last year. So I would say there's also a big piece about knowing who you are as an entrepreneur and where you fit into the puzzle. Because from all of the great advice we have here about solving a real problem and getting real customer feedback, you have to know where your greatest input is going to be into this process. And it might be that you're a technology person, but then you need to surround yourself with marketers and business people and all of the other types of people that are required in there. Or maybe you don't have the technical knowledge. And so you don't have the technical knowledge and you're more of the marketer. Well, you're going to need to get that. So understanding the complementary people and resources you're going to need, I think is huge. And that comes down to understanding yourself and what motivates you, because you might be an introvert, you might be an extrovert. So really paying some attention to that is going to help you go faster because you know where you're weak and other people can complement you and make a stronger team.
So, hey guys, this is Harshita. I'm so sorry. I think Amir has lost his connection. So I'm here to wrap the things up. And so any final words, as we have already shared all the final words. So let me just wrap it up now. So, all right, guys, this brings us to the end of this wonderful session with Daniel, Raj, Steve, and Victor. You guys were amazing. I personally loved the panel discussion. It was such a value-packed session, and I learned a lot. I hope our attendees learned a lot too. So this is not where it ends, guys. We have a lot more sessions coming up. So you can just go to our www.designhill.com/events website. I'll just share all the links in the chat section once I'm done with the conversation. So yeah, you can just follow us on LinkedIn. You can just subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all the recordings of all the events from the past events and the upcoming events also. And if you want to build your brand, use a coupon code called COGB15 to avail 50% of discount on your Designhill contest service. And on that note, I would just like to say thank you so much, all of you, for coming here, staying connected, and sharing all your valuable feedbacks.
Thank you. And thank you, Daniel, Raj, and Victor. Wonderful being on a panel with you.
Great, guys. So on that note, I would love to say goodbye to everyone who has joined us here today. So take care, guys. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Great pleasure.